Welcome to the EQ Fit podcast. Our mission is to equip people to prosper in every aspect of their life. Whether you're at home or in the workplace, we explore practical ways of improving success, satisfaction, finding balance, and building enjoyable and beneficial relationships. Thank you for joining us. We're on a journey of understanding emotional intelligence. We started by looking at the major categories of emotional intelligence, which are the 5-part model: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And there are different models, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. Now we can dive deeper into the individual competencies of emotional intelligence and how those can be learned and how those can be developed. Now, I use the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence competencies. Why? Why do I use that model? First, 6 seconds is the largest emotional intelligence organization in the world. So that's a pretty good start. Number 2, the competencies are easy to understand. This allows people to learn and grow them more rapidly. And the competencies of emotional intelligence are competencies that can be grown probably more rapidly than most other competencies or skill sets out there. Number 3, the 6 seconds assessments have been used and validated with hundreds of thousands of unique individuals all across the world. I don't know exactly what that number is now, but last time I looked at it, it was well in excess of 500,000 unique individuals. It's probably getting quite a bit further up there because it's been a while since I've looked at that number. Number 4, their support materials, their case studies, and their resource library far exceeds anything from any other emotional intelligence focused organization. And believe me, if all you get is certified in the assessment and you have those measures but don't have a path forward, it's really hard to help people change what they want to change, even if that's you doing it for yourself. It is one of the reasons that I selected 6 seconds and their model of emotional intelligence and assessments. And number 5, I have become certified in all of their assessments and practices and have seen these change lives for the better for almost a decade, almost 10 years now. Now, a quick note, just so that you don't get confused. The 6 seconds model contains 3 main categories of emotional intelligence, whereas we've been talking about 5 main categories. Let me connect the dots for you so there isn't any confusion here. In 6 seconds, they call it self-awareness or know yourself, and that's the same with the 5 category model. It's self-awareness. The second for 6 seconds is self-management, or what they call choose yourself. Now, that in the 5 category model includes self-regulation and motivation. And then the third main category in the 6 seconds model is self-direction, or what they call give yourself. And in the 5 category model, that's going to include empathy and social skills. Now that may be a little bit confusing, but if you go to my website, eqfit.org, and look under a blog article that is basically what we're talking about today on the competencies of emotional intelligence, you'll see a direct correlation between those, so you can look at that in writing and understand it better. The key point here is that the 6 seconds model is validated, it's proven to work exceptionally well, and it's easy to understand. And when we talk about certain things that can be very complex, like emotions and the role they play in our decision making, interactions, conflict resolution, the way we live our lives, the way we create rules, our self talk, all of the different things that emotions impact in our lives, it's very easy to get confused. So the more simple it can be, the more understandable it can be, the better off we are. And that's why I use that model. Now, I'm going to start with the first competency in the category of self-awareness. And that competency is enhance emotional literacy. Emotional literacy is really integral to emotional intelligence, especially the category of self-awareness. It involves accurately identifying and understanding feelings. This competency is essential as emotions, which basically are neurotransmitters, they act as a feedback system and deliver crucial data that influences our behavior and our decisions and our actions. Emotional literacy allows for the effective interpretation of this data. And that's critical. If you cannot interpret the emotions you're having, identify them, define them, understand them, it's really difficult to navigate them and to get a more intentional response. So this is a really critical first competency of emotional intelligence. And the more we can increase that, the more we can get better insights into the core drivers of our behavior and the behavior of others, and helping to manage reactions. Responding is far better than reacting unless you're in survival mode. And there are times in our life when we get in survival mode, and that's when reactions really do come into their own, so to speak. So this enhance emotional literacy, one way I like to explain this competency is by comparing it to a library. Now, we know that there are over 34,000 unique emotions. That may surprise you. Did you know that there are 34,000 unique emotions? Well, there are. So I want you to think of a library that holds many different books. We've all been to libraries. Now I want you to think of an emotional literacy library in your brain that is filled with over 34,000 books. And each of those books is a specific emotion. And just like a book, knowing the title is only the first step in understanding the emotion and how it impacts you and how it impacts others. The more you can read that book on that emotion, the more easily you can identify it, understand it, and then know what to do with it. And that is the essence of emotional literacy. Emotional literacy is about becoming a student of emotions and really truly understanding how they impact you and others. And then that understanding can be used to predict likely outcomes in decision-making and behaviors and the actions that you take. So it's really central to making better decisions, understanding the emotional environment around you, taking actions that have a better outcome. And so this is a critical part of how we enhance success and satisfaction in our life and in our work. So now let's talk about measuring these competencies, because we need to have a measure. The first step in measuring our emotional intelligence competencies is to find a validated assessment. And I highly recommend you can go online and find free stuff. I get it, and it's fun and all of that. If you're serious about developing these competencies for yourself and having an entire, not just a model, but an entire pathway to understanding these competencies, learning them, growing the skills that come out of these competencies, then I highly recommend getting a good, validated emotional intelligence or EQ assessment. And now that you have a measure, let's say you've taken that assessment, and let's just say it's the 6 seconds, what they call the SEI, 6 seconds emotional intelligence assessment. Let's say you've taken that. Well, that's great, but until you have that report in your hand and can see it, without that, we're simply guessing at where our competencies might be. And frankly, most people don't even know what those competencies are. So instead of guessing, let's assess. And when we assess, we can create a viable pathway to develop and grow these competencies and the skills that come out of them. So I'm looking at a recent report that came from one of my clients, somebody I've worked with for a number of years. And I'm noticing in their emotional intelligence assessment report that a lot of their competencies have dropped over the last couple of years. So taking an EQ assessment and understanding the measures of the competencies should be a periodic thing, not a one-time thing. If all you want is some information for fun and all of that, sure, do it one time, get that information, start to understand what it means. But for those who are interested in really developing these skills and making them more successful and more satisfied in their life and in their work, this is an ongoing process. And taking these assessments periodically will show the ups and downs that we experience in life. But it also gives us a gauge of where we are. And that is very helpful in redirecting if we need to, or focusing on an area that we may not have known was slipping. So I'm looking at this, I'm seeing a lot of the competencies have dropped since the last time this person took this assessment. And one of the biggest drops is in that area of self-awareness. Self-awareness is so critical to understanding how we're showing up for ourselves and other people. That's probably a very simple way of looking at it, but I think it's also very accurate. I would bet if you thought about people in your life who don't really understand how they're showing up for you and for other people, I'll bet you could name some people right now that you think have some pretty big blind spots and may have some behaviors or ways that they do things that irritate or frustrate people, but maybe they're not even aware of it. That's what self-awareness is all about. So let's go back to this specific competency of enhancing emotional literacy. What happens if you have a low score in that area? Well, individuals with low emotional literacy might struggle to recognize their own emotions and the emotions of others. This can lead to misinterpretations of social cues. It could lead to impaired interpersonal relationships. Probably the quality of interactions can go down, the quality of relationships. They may have a more difficult time building trust. A lack of emotional literacy hampers agility in adapting to changing emotional landscapes. So it may be hard for people that have low emotional literacy to be agile enough to adapt moving through different types of emotional environments. These individuals may also find it challenging to bounce back from emotional setbacks due to a poor understanding of their emotional responses, or maybe more emotional reactions. That's very important. Frankly, without sharing, and I never will, names or organizations or anything else, I'm seeing several people right now who are having trouble with resilience in their life. And part of that, when you think of emotional load, the emotional load that people are carrying that directly impacts stress levels and burnout and other things that are pretty serious. There's a lot of people out there that one of their main gap areas is that they don't understand their own emotions enough and how those are impacting them, that they get stuck in cycles that are negative cycles. They're non-productive cycles. And that doesn't have to stay that way. There is a pathway out of that. But without knowing how these emotions are impacting them, or even being able to identify them and name them, they're going to stay stuck because there is no exit ramp when that happens. Now, leaders with low emotional literacy often face difficulties in empathizing with their team members. That can lead to ineffective communication and leadership. It can result in decreased morale and decreased productivity. It could even lead to people leaving the organization. There's an old saying, people don't leave organizations, they leave managers. And you could say leader, you could say supervisor in there instead of manager, but I think there's a lot of truth in that. So let's turn the table now. What does it look like if you have high scores in emotional literacy? High emotional literacy is characterized by a deep understanding of one's own emotions and those of other people. This leads to better communication, more empathy, and better interpersonal skills. High emotional literacy enhances an individual's agility in emotional situations. And frankly, I don't know of many situations that do not have an emotional component attached. Now, I know business owners and business leaders, and I've met with many over the years who say, we need to check emotions at the door. We don't need that emotional stuff in here, which is crazy talk. Because, okay, let's take that to its illogical extreme. So let's get rid of all the emotions. Now, what they're talking about are emotions that create drama or distraction or dissonance or all those D words that we don't like, right? But saying let's check emotions at the door and leave those out of the workplace, here's what you're also leaving out. You're leaving out excitement. You're leaving out that feeling of joy. You're leaving out that feeling of achievement and success and accomplishment. You're leaving out engagement. Everybody that does a climate survey measures engagement levels. Well, guess what engagement is? The emotional commitment somebody has to the organization and to the effort. So you take emotions out of the workplace, you're taking out the bad, sure, but you're also taking out the good, the stuff that really drives people and motivates people and gives them energy. So that agility, when you have high scores in emotional literacy, it really enhances agility and a better understanding of emotions in the workplace. It also promotes quick adaptation. So people can think on their feet better. They can be more adaptable, more agile. in dealing with different things. It also fosters resilience, enabling effective coping mechanisms in stressful situations. And you may find that in your life there are some stressful situations. Effective leaders with high emotional literacy can motivate and engage their teams more successfully. There's that engagement factor. They understand team dynamics better. They can foster a positive work environment, leading to increased performance, productivity, and satisfaction. Well, I think we've made a really good case for why emotional literacy is so important and what it can do for someone if they develop that competency of enhancing emotional literacy and putting that into different types of skills. So now let's just take a look at how to do that. Let's be practical in how to approach enhancing our emotional literacy. Well, one of the first things we can do is recognize your emotions. Start by identifying and acknowledging your emotions as they occur. And this is where so many people get sideways with this. Oh, I can't feel that way. Oh, I shouldn't. I wish I could just say stop. I wish when anybody thinks that, I wish I could say stop it and just look at them and say, that emotion that you're having right now is sending you a message. Your brain is sending you a message. And the fact that you're having that emotion, you can't really control the emotions that are triggered by external stimuli, which is basically something that happens that you observe or are a part of. You can't really control the emotions you have. It's what you do with those emotions that you can control. So first, recognize your emotions. And this can be done through regular self-reflection or even maintaining like a journal or something, or just even a notepad where you can write down, hey, here was the situation, here's what I was thinking, here was what I was feeling, here's what I was saying, here's what I was doing. And if I could go back and change anything, what would it be? I think that's a great 5-step approach. And I ask people to do that all the time, especially when they're struggling with their emotions and trying to better understand them and how to use the energy and information emotions give you in a more productive way. Well, the second thing you can do to develop emotional literacy is literally name your emotions. You know, there's a phrase I've heard a lot, name it to tame it, which I love because if you're having anger, if you're having frustration, you need to name that for yourself so that you can start the process of navigating it or taming it. Learn to put a name to your feelings. That's all those books in the library we talked about, the emotional library. You're literally writing the name of that emotion on the binder of that book so that you know what it is and you start to understand how it's impacting you. This helps in acknowledging and accepting them, which is essential for emotional literacy. Again, you can control what you do with the emotions if you know what they are, if you understand how they impact you, so that you can then use that to make a better outcome. Here's something else you can do. Understand the cause. Try to understand what triggers the emotion. Is it a specific situation? Is it a person? Is it a thought? Recognizing those triggers can help you manage your reactions better. And again, I always like to say responding is better than reacting, or response is better than react. Here's another thing you can focus on, practicing empathy. Now, empathy itself is another competency of emotional intelligence that we will measure in all of these competencies we're talking about. But it's interesting how different competencies can help you develop other competencies. So practicing empathy is understanding the emotions of other people and their perspectives. This not only helps in improving your relationships with people and your interactions with them, but also gives you insight into how emotions influence behavior. And that insight is priceless. The more insights you can get into that, the better off you're going to be. Doesn't matter what your position in life. The more you can understand other people and their behavior, it's going to add value to your life. Here's something else. You can reflect on your responses. Analyze how you typically respond to different situations and different emotions that come up through those. Consider if there are more constructive ways to respond. You can seek feedback. Get input from other people on how they perceive your emotional responses. This can provide valuable insights into your emotional patterns. And I have a very specific toolkit from 6 Seconds called the Vital Signs Toolkit that is infused with emotional intelligence, but it is a leadership 360, it's a team climate survey, and it's an entire organizational climate survey. But with the infusion of emotional intelligence, which makes it that much more actionable data. And so what we're saying here, this feedback, I've seen feedback work in people's lives in very effective and productive ways. You can educate yourself. Read books, take courses on emotional intelligence to deepen your understanding, to learn new strategies. That's why I do these episodes. It's why I write my blog articles. It's why I put YouTube videos up so people can have resources to go to and they can educate themselves. And by the way, that YouTube channel is simply YouTube at EQFit. You can practice mindfulness. Engaging in a mindfulness or meditation, and that's a focused meditation on your situation. You can use those 5 elements I talked about earlier. What happened? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What did I say or do? If I could go back and change it, what would I do? That's a wonderful way to practice mindfulness in a very practical sense. And that really helps to not just manage emotions better, but to get better at it and become more adept at it as you move forward. Remember, like any skill, improving emotional literacy, it takes time and it takes practice. It's okay to make mistakes along the way, as long as you use that as learning opportunities. Enhancing emotional literacy is the first competency in developing greater self-awareness. Building our emotional library becomes a valuable resource in every aspect of our lives and our work. This competency increases effectiveness and mastery of a multitude of skills, which is going to increase our satisfaction and our success. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any questions about this week's episode, or maybe a suggestion for future episodes you'd like us to explore, please contact us through our website at eqfit.org. For more information and inspiration, connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at EQFit.